Motion number 3, environmental protection. I call the Minister to move the motion. Minister Mary Creagh.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move the motion, standing in my right honourable friend's name, on the order paper. Madam Deputy Speaker, every person in this country has the right to walk down their street without stumbling on a single-use vape that has been tossed onto the pavement. They have the right to take their children to the park without their child picking up a shiny vape that's been cast aside in the playground. No driver should fear that their car tyre will explode by driving over a single-use vape in the road. Yet I was sent recently a picture of just such a tyre explosion. What started out as a useful means to stop adult smoking has become a menace on our street. Almost 3/4 of single-use vapes are incorrectly disposed of. Material Focus estimates that 5 million vapes are thrown away each week. That's equivalent to 8 vapes a second, and it's 4 times as many as this time last year. They have turned into a constant wave of waste, wreaking havoc, and we are literally left to pick up the pieces. When they are littered, they introduce plastics, nicotine salts, copper, cadmium, lead, and lithium-ion batteries into our environment. This harms our wildlife, our soils, our rivers, and our streams. And last year, 50 tonnes of lithium, the same amount needed to power 5,000 electric vehicle batteries, were discarded into our environment. Or they end up incorrectly being put into black bin household waste, where at best they end up either in landfill or they are incinerated. At worst, they cause fires when they are crushed in bin lorries. So that risks harm to the public, to refuse workers, and to firefighters. In September, a fire at a waste centre in Basildon was started by a lithium-ion battery, the sort that are found in vapes. The fire spread across warehouses, set alight 15 heavy goods vehicles. People were evacuated, and the fire service was on site for 24 hours a day for almost a week. We know that these products also are designed to appeal to children. According to Action on Smoking and Health and their research, the rise in single-use vapes has happened concurrently with an increase in young people vaping. We must ban by banning these harmful products. I would like to thank the Honourable Gentleman for Keighley and Ilkley, who took steps to introduce a ban earlier this year. His was the right action, and we will not delay. Transitioning to a zero-waste economy is one of 5 priorities that this department will deliver as part of a mission-led government to rebuild Britain. And this ban is an important first step on that journey. Before I turn to the details of the legislation, I'd like to thank the work of the Secondary Legislation Scrutiny Committee. Their report highlighted several points of interest, in particular the links to youth vaping, which I mentioned earlier, and whether we will monitor products coming to market following the implementation of this proposed ban. We will work closely with the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency to understand the type of products coming to market, and we will continue to look at this in future. The committee also highlighted correspondence from Green Alliance, who support the ban but wished for earlier implementation and sought assurance on enforcement. We want to introduce the ban as soon as possible, but we must allow a minimal but reasonable transition for businesses to run down stocks and adapt their business activities, which is why the ban will come into force on the 1st of June next year. Effective enforcement is crucial. We will work closely with enforcement agencies to understand how best to support them. Let me now, Madam Deputy Speaker, turn to the details of the legislation. The ban we are introducing uses powers under the Environmental Protection Act 1990. Part 1 sets out the meaning of a single-use vape, which is a vape that is not both rechargeable and refillable. The ban applies to England only, but my excellent officials have worked closely with devolved governments who are bringing in equivalent legislation. And we are grateful to our colleagues in the devolved governments for their collaboration to ensure that from the 1st of June next year, there will be a UK-wide ban. Parts 2 and 3 of the legislation introduce offences and enforcement provisions. Enforcement of the ban in England will be carried out through local authority trading standards officers, and the powers in the legislation have been developed in partnership with them. The regulations mean that illegal traders can be issued with an on-the-spot fine and the products they're selling taken away. It is also possible for local authorities to reclaim the costs of investigating and enforcing the regulations from the rogue traders. And finally, Part 4 of the legislation covers requirements for guidance and the need to review and evaluate the ban. Let me conclude by saying that vapes... I will give way.
Giving way. And she's talked about the environmental impact of disposable vapes. What does she think about the environmental impact of reusable vape devices which are being sold? The government's own impact assessment suggests that by the year 2034 there will be 2 billion total number of reusable vape devices being sold. What impact does she think that's going to have on the environment, and how's that going to differ from the sale of disposable vapes?
I think what we're trying to do with this ban is to get rid of the vapes that are not rechargeable and refillable. So the vapes that are both refillable and rechargeable will continue to be sold as a valuable aid to help adults stop smoking. But the sort of almost toy-like vapes that you find littered in every street, and I'm sure his Christchurch constituency is no different from mine in Coventry East. These almost toy-like items are the real problem. But I will come back to that on him, and I would say predictions about the future. We see yesterday in the newspapers that there is a pill that has been developed to help smokers quit smoking. So who knows where we will be in 5 years' time. The future, we can always guarantee, will be different to the past. Let me conclude by saying that vapes can help adults to quit smoking, but single-use vapes are a waste of our precious national resources. The sheer volume we see on our streets and the widespread harm that they cause must be stopped. So I do commend these regulations to the House.
The question is as on the order paper, and I call Shadow Minister Dr Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is an honour today to be speaking for the opposition on this important motion on environmental protection. May I begin by thanking the government for laying this statutory instrument originally put forward by the previous Conservative government. This House is at its best when we are united in common humanity and working together across the House to pass legislation that will support and protect our precious environment and also human and animal health. I'm glad that the government has agreed with our measures in bringing forward this ban on disposable vapes. I'm very happy to say, therefore, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we, His Majesty's loyal opposition, will be supporting the passage of this important environmental statutory instrument today. Firstly, I want to thank all of those who have made the principle behind this statutory instrument possible, from MPs and ministers from both sides of the House, to charities, to NGOs, to parents, teachers and health professionals who sounded the alarm on the issue of disposable vapes and their impact. This legislation is a targeted step to ensure environmental protection and mitigate the risk posed by single-use disposable vaping products. To this end, we know that single-use vapes pose a range of risks to our environment, to animals, both domestic and wild, and even people, especially our young folk, as the Minister has said. It is estimated that almost 5 million single-use vapes are littered or thrown away in general waste every week, and the scale at which lithium-ion batteries are being improperly disposed of through single-use vapes is absolutely staggering. It's astonishing that it's estimated that the lithium in disposable vapes discarded in this way each year is the equivalent to the lithium in batteries of approximately 1,200 or more electrical vehicles. The number of these single-use vapes being littered or thrown away every year is unfortunately steeply rising as well. We know that the improper disposal of lithium-ion batteries already poses a significant risk of serious fires and also pollution. Just as badly, too, as the Minister has said, both in urban and in rural areas, we are seeing littering in areas with vapes carelessly thrown away by the wayside. We also know that the disposal of single-use vapes can lead to the leaking of plastics and toxic chemicals into our natural environment and into our precious waterways. We cannot overestimate the seriousness of this and the long-term dangers that will result if we allow a steady or increasing flow of these materials into the environment. When we are all concerned about the need to improve our waterways and rivers, it is vital that we tackle this very real threat. Improper disposal of single-use vapes, Madam Deputy Speaker, which unfortunately occurs in the majority of cases when single-use vapes are disposed of, also leads to a risk to animals and wildlife potentially consuming them. Madam Deputy Speaker, I declare a personal and professional interest in this as a veterinary surgeon and a pet owner. In fact, not long ago, when I was walking my young dog, Poppy, she one day disappeared into the undergrowth and came out with a brightly coloured, melon-flavoured disposable vape in her mouth. Now, fortunately, I was able to get the vape out of her mouth quickly, Madam Deputy Speaker, but I absolutely shudder to think what could have happened if Poppy had chewed it, crunched it, and indeed swallowed it, containing a battery, toxic chemicals, and shattered plastic. I'm sure the whole House can agree that this is particularly concerning to allow millions of flavoured and brightly coloured items with their incredibly harmful chemicals to lay littered and damaging the health of any creature that might ingest them. With this in mind, it is important to act, and the implementation date of the 1st of June 2025 should offer businesses time to adjust to the new measures. It is vitally important, however, for the government to clarify how they intend to tackle the disposal of existing stock if it's not sold by June 2025. Can the Minister therefore please assure the House that any single-use vaping stock unsold as of the implementation of these measures will be collected and disposed of in the appropriate manner, and that the government will produce a plan to ensure this moving forward? With this ban coming into force, it is also essential that the illegal import of single-use vapes into this country is targeted. It is extremely concerning that there are reports of vapes being imported into our country that flout legal safety regulations on the number of puffs and potentially the amount of nicotine contained, and even potentially containing illicit and dangerous substances, as well as reports of chemicals like lead and nickel being found in them. It is hugely concerning to think that many of these have been getting into the hands of huge numbers, Madam Deputy Speaker, of our under-18s, with marketing ads on social media specifically enticing young people with bright colours and appealing flavours like bubblegum, cherry ice, luring our young people into a nicotine addiction and the risk of illicit substances. All of this could be having serious consequences on the physical and indeed the mental health of our young people, with reports of children having their sleep patterns disrupted, setting their alarms for 2 or 3 in the morning so that they can have a vape during the night to avoid withdrawal symptoms in the morning, or students leaving lessons or even examinations because they simply cannot last without the use of a vape. It is these disposable vapes that this statutory instrument specifically targets that are afflicting so many of our young people. I will give way.
Grateful to my honourable friend. It's not just disposable vapes, the issue is about illegal vapes. My honourable friend was referring to the issue of illegal vapes. It is thought that there may be as many as 120 million illegal vapes being sold each year. Isn't that the area where we should be concentrating? Because these regulations only deal with legal vapes. Shouldn't we be more concerned about the environmental impact and other health impacts of illegal vapes?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. We need to be getting rid of all of these disposable vapes, legal or illegal. And in fact, if any child is actually vaping, that is illegal. They are getting hold of these vapes around the law, and people are exploiting our young people, and actually the long-term consequences for their physical and mental health we still do not know. So we've just got to get on with getting rid of these single-use disposable vapes. To be clear, we know that vaping has its part to play in helping adults to quit tobacco smoking, but we owe it to our young people and others to tackle the unacceptable risks of the illicit market and tackle existing nicotine addiction rather than creating a new generation of addiction. So with regard to the risk of disposable vapes being imported for sale, can the Minister confirm what measures will be put in place to ensure that the border authorities have the proper powers and scope to ensure that there's no room for the creation of an illegal disposable vape import industry? And in addition, as part of this, will additional resources be allocated to our border force so that this legislation will have the teeth it needs to prevent potential illegal imports of vapes? It's also deeply important that the proper enforcement measures are in place, as we know how difficult it sometimes can be to enforce these sorts of bans. So can the Minister also... I will give way. Yeah.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. He keeps using the expression potential illegal import. There is massive illegal import already taking place. And the number of illegal imports detected is a minute proportion of the actual numbers of illegal imports which are coming into the market. So can he concentrate on the current issue relating to illegal imports instead of describing it as a potential?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention again. I'm very well aware that there are illegal importations and we need to clamp down on that. What I am talking about is that once this ban is in place, if vapes are still being imported into this country, then that will be illegal in terms of that being sent on for sale. So we've got to clamp down on it. I'm aware of what my honourable gentleman friend says, but we need to crack on and get rid of these disposable vapes. So as I was saying, can the Minister also please confirm what measures will be in place to ensure the proper and full enforcement of the ban, and can she reassure the House that the Government will monitor on an ongoing basis the performance of the enforcement measures in preventing the sale and distribution of single-use vapes? In addition, can the Minister reassure the House that the Government will keep very much a watching brief in case unscrupulous people try to create possible loopholes in this ban by adapting disposable vape products to look in a sham way that they may look like they are reusable, refillable, or indeed rechargeable? So can the Government keep a watching brief on that? Also, the Minister talked about the devolved administrations, and I welcome her comments on that. But with this England-only legislation today, and with, as she has said, similar versions of these regulations likely to be approved in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland in the coming months, can the Government assure the House again that the discussions are set in place with the devolved administrations on the specific timings so that we don't inadvertently create the potential for disposable vape tourism in different parts of the United Kingdom? In closing then, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I said in my opening remarks, we will be supporting this measure, and while I do hope that the Minister can provide clarity on the questions I have posed, I thank the Government today for bringing forward this Conservative measure.
I now call Lloyd Hatton to make his maiden speech.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for calling me to speak during today's important debate. I'd like to begin by taking the opportunity to thank my constituents for choosing change and putting their trust in me at the ballot box this summer. And this was indeed a change election. The last time a Labour MP for South Dorset stood here and made his maiden speech, I was just 6 years old. But my Labour predecessor, Lord Knight, did not waste any time winning my support. As the local MP, Lord Knight relentlessly fought for my community. and he leaves behind a legacy that we can all be proud of. His successes include rebuilding my dilapidated primary school and then rebuilding my secondary school as well. And Lord Knight was also at the heart of the campaign to win the 2012 Summer Olympic Games bid, with Weymouth and Portland proudly hosting the sailing events. I consider myself very fortunate to have one of my predecessors working just along the corridor in the other place. Now, this Palace of Westminster can be an ancient and mysterious workplace at times, so I will always be grateful for my Lord Knight in shining armour just around the corner. I'd also like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to my immediate predecessor, Richard Drax. As our MP, his commitment to our armed forces community was second to none. The constituency may have changed hands, but I fully intend to continue his work championing our armed forces. If I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would also like to pay tribute to another former member of this House, Baroness Hodge. Many members of this place will have worked along Baroness Hodge as I have, and working with her is certainly an unforgettable experience. Relentless, feisty, ferocious, attack dog. These are just some of the terms bandied around the staff room at Amazon headquarters after only the briefest of cross-examinations by Baroness Hodge. And with good reason. She exemplifies how you can be an effective and tenacious change-maker in Parliament. For more than a decade, she has been the scourge of tax dodgers and kleptocrats, white-collar criminals and oligarchs alike. It was a pleasure to work alongside her in the battle against dirty money and economic crime. And I look forward to continuing her important work, both in this place and on the Public Accounts Committee. Before I take you on a walking tour of my constituency, I would just like to say thank you to the people that got me here. My parents, my wider family, my friends and my partner have always had my back. They've always supported my endeavours, and they've given me so much to ensure that every opportunity was always made available to me. Thank you. There is something deeply personal about being able to represent your home. It is an honour to be able to represent my friends, my family, my neighbours and my former classmates. And in the years ahead, I look forward to rigorously standing up for all of the communities that make up South Dorset. Wherever you look across my constituency, a strong sense of community and local pride is unmissable. Starting our stroll in the east of my constituency, you will find Studland and then Swanage, a small, charming seaside town. The people of Swanage have much to be proud of, including the legacy of one Trevor Chadwick. Trevor was a public-spirited man, a local school teacher and lifeboat volunteer. And in 1939, he joined Sir Nicholas Winton to assemble the Prague Kindertransport. Despite the clear dangers facing him, Trevor went to Prague to help rescue 669 children from the Nazi regime. And yet, much like Sir Nicholas Winton, Trevor did not seek praise or recognition for his heroism, and for many years his work went unmarked. There now stands a statue in Swanage marking his proud legacy. Walking past it just the other day, I was reminded of the quiet selflessness and compassion that sits at the heart of all of our communities. We can all learn from his example. The town of Swanage is also rightly proud of its many independent businesses, its award-winning beach and its essential community hospital. Without these institutions, the town would be lost. So I look forward to advocating for all three at every opportunity. Now, moving west on our walk along the coastline of my constituency, you are spoilt. Whatever other members might claim, Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that my constituency truly is the most impressive, the most spectacular and the most charming. And if you don't believe me, then just ask UNESCO. My constituency is the proud home of the Jurassic Coast. St Aldham's Head, Chapman's Pool, Bacon Hole, Lulworth Cove, Durdle Door and Ringstead Bay. They are all geological gems dotted along the coast. Most members have probably already visited this part of my constituency, either on a romantic weekend away, a summer holiday, or an ill-fated geography field trip many moons ago. Either way, all who visit the Jurassic Coast leave with lifelong memories. Rural communities like Corfe, Worth, Langton, Winfrith and Wool are all proud to call the Jurassic Coast our back garden. So I will do all that I can to defend, preserve and enhance this unique landscape. Ambling further west, you will arrive at the friendly seaside town of Weymouth. Weymouth and nearby Portland was a key departure point for the Dunkirk evacuation and later the D-Day landings. My hometown was a generous home to soldiers, sailors and airmen during the Second World War. In the months prior to D-Day, Weymouth hosted thousands of British and Allied forces as they prepared for the liberation of Europe. In Weymouth, we do not easily forget the importance of these D-Day landings, and our town is proud of the role we played turning the tide against fascism. In a world which can often feel insecure and riven by conflict, our community will always remember the sacrifices made to defend democracy and freedom. Now, Weymouth also remains proud of a local parliamentarian, Sir Thomas Fowle Buxton. In the early 19th century, Buxton was a Member of Parliament for Weymouth and a leading member of the abolitionist movement. Alongside William Wilberforce, Buxton led efforts to abolish slavery throughout the British Empire. Wherever you go in Weymouth, there are quiet reminders of this important figure and the role he played in making the world a more civilised place. We are proud of his legacy, and I believe we are a more kind and caring community because of it. Weymouth is a fantastic place to call home, but that does not mean our town is without its challenges. Growing up here, the message I too often heard was that to get on, you had to get out. I reject this outlook altogether. I'm proud to call Weymouth home, and I will do everything I can to attract the jobs, investment and opportunities that every young person here deserves. Yeah. Arriving at the westward end of our walk through my constituency, you will find the Isle of Portland, but you do not need to visit Portland to appreciate its significance. Parts of this Palace of Westminster were built using Portland limestone. The Cenotaph and Whitehall were also constructed using this stone, as was the UN headquarters and much of Buckingham Palace. We are proud that a part of Portland can always be found in the corridors of power. And yet Westminster and Whitehall can too often feel remote and far removed from life on this island. So I will always stand up for the proud communities living on Portland, and I will do what I can to shrink the gap between communities and the corridors of power. I've begun by working with the government to shut down the Bibby Stockholm barge, and I will continue by challenging proposals to build an incinerator and campaigning for improved healthcare and much-needed green investment. Well, there you have it, Madam Deputy Speaker, a short ramble across South Dorset, all enjoyed from the comfort of these green benches. The countryside and coastline, the towns and villages that make up my constituency are brimming with pride and strong communities. It is an immeasurable honour to represent each and every one of them, and I shall seek to serve them first and foremost in this House. Thank you.
Yeah. I now call Liberal Democrat spokesperson Liz Jarvis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for South Dorset on his excellent maiden speech. I have indeed enjoyed many family holidays in his constituency. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am pleased we are having this debate today and that the Liberal Democrats are supporting this measure. We have been calling for action on single-use vapes for some time. Single-use or disposable vapes are a menace, and the evidence for banning them is clear and overwhelming. It is staggering that each week over 5 million disposable vapes are discarded in the UK, posing significant environmental and public health challenges, littering our streets, countryside and beaches. These devices, which are difficult to recycle because of their lithium-ion batteries, are a growing threat to wildlife and waterways. It is crucial that our waterways, including the rare chalk stream, the River Itchen, which runs through my constituency of Eastleigh, are protected. The Rivers Trust has found that the electric components in disposable vapes release chemicals and heavy metals as they degrade, severely threatening life in our rivers. As the Minister highlighted, when improperly disposed of, these batteries can cause fires in waste and refuse lorries, putting additional strain on local services and posing safety risks. All the disposable vapes discarded in a year provide enough lithium to power over 5,000 electric cars. The RSPCA has also raised serious concerns about the impact of carelessly discarded disposable vapes on animal welfare because of the risk to wildlife through ingestion or habitat disruption. While vapes have an important role to play in smoking cessation, single-use vapes present unique risks to children and young people. Marketed with colourful packaging, a choice of flavours and a price point far lower than traditional cigarettes, they are particularly appealing to under 18s. According to the public health charity Action on Smoking and Health, 18% of 11 to 17-year-olds have tried disposable vapes. I hope the government will also address the concerns of the Mental Health Foundation that those with mental health issues who are more likely to use disposable vapes and the trusts that provide care to them, including cessation services, are properly supported in the transition. Madam Deputy Speaker, we face an escalating crisis that affects our planet and the next generation. Young people are our future and we owe them swift and meaningful action. While the Liberal Democrats support this measure, we hope the government will ensure that this ban is effective and that manufacturers and retailers will play their part. There must be robust regulations, investment in cessation services, and the health of our communities must be prioritised. I hope the government will take this opportunity to address these concerns with the urgency they demand, ensuring a future that protects the health and well-being of young people and preserves our environment.
Yeah. I now call Mary Glindon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I say what an honour it's been to hear my honourable friend's maiden speech and how proud he is of the constituency, that's his home constituency, and he now represents. I wish him all the best in his parliamentary career. Madam Deputy Speaker, vaping remains the most effective tool that the UK has to help smokers quit, and recent data from ASH has shown that in the last 5 years, 2.7 million hard smokers have used vaping as a means of quitting. Disposable vapes have played a vital role in supporting smoker transition to a less harmful, accessible and affordable entry-level product. And without these products, there's a real risk that fewer smokers will make the decision to try vaping as an aid to quit. There are important concerns about the environmental impact of single-use vapes and their accessibility to children, which have already been highlighted in this debate. However, the government will need to be prepared for the inevitable increase in availability of black market products that is certain to come about because of this ban. An increased vaping black market will pose a greater risk to both the environment and children's health. Current laws already prohibit sales of vapes to those under 18 and require adherence to environmental regulations. However, enforcement has been minimal. Stronger enforcement of existing regulations could effectively address issues without banning disposable vapes outright. The government has made the right decision in progressing with the licensing scheme, but the fines for breaching rules must be higher than £200 per offence. The UK VIA has repeatedly called for fines of up to £10,000, which would play a real role in deterring rogue traders from selling products to children and illegal products more generally. In essence, this is not a ban on disposables, it's a ban on legal compliant disposables. The illicit disposable, containing goodness knows what, will continue and even proliferate in popularity post the ban. Demand for multi-tank vape products has been growing since the UK-wide disposable vape ban was first proposed in January this year. The regulations appear to ban very high puff count devices, but what's likely to happen from next June is that the irresponsible manufacturers from overseas will innovate to sidestep this provision and possibly make their mesh coils replaceable to enable them to continue to sell these products. It would be better for the government to legislate for one device, one tank. If the Minister cannot be more explicit about these devices in this regulation, I hope the government will address them in the Tobacco and Vapes Bill. As I said at the beginning of my contribution, we must be mindful that vapes have been the most effective tool to help existing smokers quit, and I hope that we can take some heed of this and make the regulations work so that the remaining 6 million smokers in this country move away from cigarettes, and most likely with the help of vaping.
I call Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it's a pleasure to follow on from the maiden speech of the member for South Dorset. It was an excellent maiden speech, very interesting, and his constituency sounds lovely indeed. Almost, it might be said, as lovely as Sleaford and North Hykeham, but not quite. But I welcome him to his place, and I hope he enjoys his time here. I also welcome the measures in this bill today. Some people say that 10-minute rule bills never become legislation, but today my 10-minute rule bill indeed will. So on the 8th of February 2023, I brought forward a disposable electronic cigarettes prohibition of sale bill with support. And I would like to put on the record my thanks for the support for my honourable friend, the member for South Leicestershire, and honourable members for Richmond Park, Barnsley North, Gower, Glindon and Consett, as well as many former members who supported that 10-minute rule bill back then. There was a consultation then that showed these measures have broad support in the country. Indeed, at that point, the support was shown at 70% of the public, which is high. The Conservative government then brought forward the Environment Protection Single-Use Vapes England Regulations 24, which I was sad to see didn't pass through wash-up at the time of the general election and therefore not brought into law. And I'm delighted that the current government is now bringing these measures forward and that they will take place soon. I'm disappointed they can't come in until next June, but I do understand the reasons the Minister has given today. There are essentially two reasons I see that this legislation is very important: the protection of children and the protection of our natural environment. In terms of protecting children, I declare an interest, well, 3 interests as a mother of 3 children, but also as a children's doctor in the NHS. They were introduced, as has been said, as a stop smoking device. I would argue they've been introduced as an alternative addiction, but they certainly are not suitable for children. The Chief Medical Officer has clearly stated on a number of occasions that if you are a smoker, they may be better for you than smoking, but if you're not a smoker, then you should avoid using them at all. And unfortunately, children have been attracted to them. It is my view that the vaping industry in some cases has actually made them deliberately more attractive to children. I do not see why a middle-aged smoker wishing to quit would need a unicorn-flavoured or a SpongeBob SquarePants-shaped vape or a teddy bear-shaped one or anything like that. They're cheap, disposable and clearly designed, in my view, to attract the children, which they certainly have done. This risks a whole generation of nicotine addicts. The long-term effects of these are unknown. They are causing disruption in schools, and 8 children at Sleaford School in my constituency have actually collapsed following the inhalation of certain vapes. The protection of the natural environment is important. When I brought forward that 10-minute rule bill, the statistic I used in my speech then was that 1.3 million of these devices were being discarded a week. The most latest figures are 5 million, and actually that figure is becoming slightly out of date now too. They're very difficult to recycle. If they're discarded as litter, they create toxic waste, which is polluting our soil, our rivers and our streams. If they're crushed in a bin lorry, they can cause fires and have indeed done so. And I will give way, yeah.
I thank her for giving way. Would she agree with me that when we're talking about the discarding of single-use vapes, there is a particular issue in our town centres? Most of our councils do not have enough money to keep town centres clean. The bill in Cheltenham, I believe, is in excess of £1 million per year. So there is a real issue there, not just about the environment, but also about public sector finances at the local level.
I thank the honourable member for giving way, and I understand his point, but I actually think the person who's responsible for putting the item in the bin is not the council, it's the person who's got it in their hand. And I think, people who drop litter should take responsibility for the fact they shouldn't be dropping litter in the first place. And I know that when I did with the River Sleaford clean-up project a year ago, did actually go around and pick up a lot of these from the riverside and the river itself. They're clearly a danger to the environment. They shouldn't be being discarded. And my honourable friend, the member for Epping, has talked about his dog Poppy, and he's recounted that story to me before, and I have to say it horrified me as an owner of a dog myself as well, that any animal could hurt themselves so badly on one of these. If we heard what happened to The minister's just talking about a tyre exploding. Goodness knows what would happen if a poor dog or other animal crushed one of these in their mouths. So I'm pleased that they're being banned. One of the challenges with the legislation was defining what is a disposable vape. And I understand that the government has done it as one which is both refillable and rechargeable. Now, one would hope, in an ideal world, that the industry would accept that and would produce their refillable ones they're currently producing and move on. But there is a great financial interest in these products. And so I am concerned that the industry will try and find workarounds and get-arounds that create a nominally reusable but practically not terribly reusable product at a price point that is discarded and that continues this problem. So I'd ask the Minister to keep these under review and to look carefully for signs of that in the way that these are being manufactured and move to re-legislate if required, should that be necessary. I also ask about enforcement. She talked about enforcement being given resources that they need. I wonder if she could tell us how much has been allocated and budgeted for enforcement of these new rules. I will give way, yes, I will give way.
Thank you. In regards to resources for enforcement on this, it often falls to the public protection departments of local councils. I led public protection as a councillor in West Berkshire, and our cupboards were full with illegal vapes that we'd seized. And so I absolutely support the call for resources, but to make sure that those resources are delivered to local councils so that they can employ more enforcement officers to get into all of those shops, to get into the back of the shops where often the illegal vapes are actually stored and the legal vapes are in the shop windows. Would you agree that it's important to get that funding into local enforcement teams?
Yeah. Thank you for his intervention, and I certainly do agree that we need to get enforcement into these teams. And one of the benefits of the ban on disposable vapes is whether they are a currently illegal vape on the basis of their constitution and content, or a currently legal disposable vape. Neither of them will be legal, so it'll be much, much easier to identify an illegal vape because all disposable versions will be, so it'll be much more straightforward. And I agree with the point that it's got to get the money to councils to do that, but employing a new enforcement officer will of course now cost more money because the government's rising national insurance contributions and it's lowering of the threshold at which those insurance contributions will be paid. This is going to affect councils up and down the country, and I don't think the government have really considered not only the direct costs to individual public sector employers, but actually the knock-on effect where those services are contracted out, provided by a third-party private company or charity, who will no doubt pass on those costs to the councils themselves. So I think that is a huge concern. Clearly, this bill is the start of an overall package to control vaping and protect our children and our natural environment. But I welcome it and will support it today.
I call Sir Christopher Chope.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow my honourable friend who's brought a lot of knowledge to this debate. But can I begin by referring to the honourable gentleman, the member for South Dorset? The last time I was this close to him was when I was standing in a pub garden overlooking Chesil Beach with my good friend Richard Drax, I think very early on in July, before polling day. And I much enjoyed listening to the honourable gentleman's tribute to Richard Drax, who not only was a good friend of mine, but also was a great servant of democracy. He contributed enormously to the successful campaign to leave the European Union. After doing that, he was also a very diligent member of the European Scrutiny Committee, and he was also extremely active in what was his great love of trying to ensure that we maintain strong defences in our country. And he used his military background to great effect in debates. But I have to say to the honourable gentleman, I think he's very lucky to be here. And the reason he's particularly lucky is because if it hadn't been for the previous government's intransigence over the issue of the Bibby Stockholm, I have every confidence to believe that my honourable friend Richard Drax would have still been in this House. So it is with mixed feelings that I listen to what the honourable gentleman had to say, but a very warm welcome to him to this place. And I'm sure that he and I will do our best to try and ensure that Dorset continues to improve in providing good quality services for all its citizens. Turning to the subject matter of this debate, I must say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that it came as a bit of a disappointment to find that neither the Minister nor my honourable friend on the front bench were really giving much reference to the unintended health consequences of the dealing with outlawing disposable vapes. There is already a real problem about illegal disposable vapes, and it is estimated that probably a third of vapes are illegal. So those are already bad for the environment. And what is going to be done by these measures to address those problems? I fear not very much, because as I said in an intervention, it is estimated that some 360 million disposable vapes got onto the market in the United Kingdom in 2023. I've had a briefing from British American Tobacco, which highlights the fact that 4.5 million illegal vapes were seized at the border by HMRC in 2023. Well, that gap between 4.5 million illegal ones being seized and 360 million estimated to be in circulation, I think highlights the gravity and extent of this problem, particularly when you extrapolate into the future and you see that the number of illegal vapes relative to normal vapes could be as high as 1 billion by 2030. That's an enormous amount of income for essentially people who are engaged in the black market trade and people smuggling and other illicit activities.
Will you give that point?
So, of course I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does he accept that it's actually quite difficult to establish which vapes are illegal and which are not currently for the consumer? And indeed, one may have even thought that going into a reputable supermarket to buy such a product was a surefire way of ensuring that it was a safe product. We did hear examples of major supermarkets selling a well-known brand of vapes that had more in them was actually legally allowed. By banning the disposable ones, it will become very clear they're all illegal.
Well, the information I've got about the extent of illegal vapes in the marketplace comes from the government itself. I think in its impact assessment for the bill, which is going to be debated in the next fortnight, the government itself accepts that there is about a 30% of the market is illegal, and it's from that's where I get my figures from. But my honourable friend refers to supermarkets, and not suggesting that there's any illegal activity within supermarkets or responsible retail. I give way again.
That there has been examples of supermarkets unknowingly selling vapes that did not meet the requirements. And the fact is it's very difficult for a consumer to identify which is, just putting them in their hand, which is a real one and which is not. And naturally this new regulation will mean that they'll be able to tell, because the one in each hand will both be not allowed.
Well, I'm not sure that is going to help much. My honourable friend's referring to, in a sense, the packaging of these vapes. But when we're talking about what are described as refillable vapes or reusable vapes, the number of those reusable vapes is projected to increase exponentially over the next several years. And the question I ask, and I didn't really get an answer to this from the Minister, is what is the impact of all those refillable or reusable vapes on the environment? Because first of all, the same issues about what goes into making the manufacture of those vapes, that applies to both disposable and reusable vapes. But why would we need to have 2 billion reusable vapes being sold by 2034 if they're not being effectively disposed of? And so just because they are disposable after one use doesn't mean that those which are described as reusable, and as my honourable friend was making the point, that we need to be very wary that the Chinese, who are the lead manufacturers and exporters in this whole field, we need to be very wary of the way in which they may well adapt their products in order to try and circumvent these regulations. But in any event, what they are producing and what other manufacturers are producing is a cost on the environment, in the sense that they are using scarce resources. And let us not be naive about the fact that once these, what may be reusable, that doesn't mean it's a permanent fixture, not like, for example, in the days when my parents, they used to smoke cigarettes through a filter which they held. Even those filters, Madam Deputy Speaker, were not permanent, and I can remember many occasions on which my parents would say, well, they got to get rid of that filter and replace it with another one. So let's be naive and think that of this enormously large number of reusable vape devices being projected to be being sold in 2034, that they are not actually going to end up in landfill. Yeah.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way, and I'm just interested to know, is he trying to make an argument that the government should have gone further and banned all vapes, including those which can be refilled?
No, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm referring to is the impact assessment. And the Minister, in responding to my intervention earlier, referred to the statement that was made yesterday by the NHS, and to the effect that a new magic pill will be available on the NHS in order to enable people to be weaned off smoking, and particularly the nicotine effects of smoking. But what the government said when bringing that forward was that this new pill would be as effective as vaping. They didn't suggest it would be more effective than vaping, they said it would be as effective as vaping, thereby recognising the important role that vaping has in promoting public health. These regulations are brought forward on the basis of the environmental impact which will flow from the environmental benefits which will flow from these regulations. But let us also be clear that there's very little provision for enforcement. References have been made already to the additional burden on local authorities. And if one looks at paragraphs 183 to 185 of the regulatory impact assessment, it accepts that there will be costs associated with inspection and law enforcement services to support the ban, and says trading standards authorities will be best placed to enforce the ban, and work will be undertaken to establish the most effective and efficient way of enforcement. But enforcement costs, they calculate, will be very low, because the assumption taken from the better regulation guidance is to assume 100% compliance by businesses. And if you make that assumption, which in my submission is a false assumption, then it can lead you to the acceptance of figures from the government which suggest that there are not going to be really any additional costs arising from enforcing these new regulations. I think that's a load of nonsense. I give way. Of course I will.
Thank you for giving way. He's making a number of interesting points, but it's not yet clear to me whether he's in favour of the banning of single-use vapes, or whether he's in favour of the banning of all vapes, or not. I think it would be instructive if we all sort of understood a little bit more what he's trying to get at in terms of the points that he's making, as interesting as they all are.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for listening to the points that I've been making. My points can be summed up in smoking costs lives, vaping saves lives. Therefore, if we can encourage more people to vape rather than smoke, that's to the public health benefit and to the benefit of the individuals affected, and also in terms of people who suffer as a result of secondary smoking or passive smoking, that those people are assisted as well. The consequence, which is accepted by the government in its impact assessment, is that by taking these measures against single-use vapes, that will result in quite a lot of people who currently use those single-use vapes going back to smoking. Vapes have a 65% success rate in enabling people to quit smoking. The Chief Executive of Action on Smoking and Health says that scare stories about young people vaping could be causing the misconception amongst adult smokers that vaping is as risky as smoking, which we know that it is not. Compliant vapes don't contain tobacco and they don't produce smoke, and vape aerosols don't contain the harmful chemicals that are in tobacco smoke. So why are we proposing to introduce regulations which, on the government's own figures, will result in about 26% of people going back to tobacco products from vaping? Of course I will.
I think he's referring to a very important issue here, and I know the honourable gentleman is very concerned about personal responsibility and people's ability to make their own choices. Surely the government is facing somewhat of a choice between the protection of an adult who's a former smoker who's now vaping, who is now going to be presented with the choice of going back to smoking, stopping vaping, or using a disposable vape, and the protection of children. Surely the protection of children is the most important, and adults are free to make their own choices about what they wish to do, as long as it's an informed choice.
Well, vaping is already, as the honourable lady opposite said, vaping for children is already. Children are not allowed to buy vapes, and they shouldn't be using them. But in my view, if children are going to make a choice between vaping and smoking, it's better that they should go vaping rather than smoking. And one of the unintended consequences which may flow from these regulations is that an increasing number of children, instead of using vaping products, will actually go back to smoking behind the bike sheds or whatever its modern equivalent is, Madam Deputy Speaker. Of course I will.
Yeah, thank you. And I should declare an interest. Actually, I am a vapor. I smoked until my wife was due to have our first son, and used vapes to be able to give up cigarettes. I've made my own vape juice before, so I knew exactly what was going into it. And I've also used disposable vapes. But actually now I use a reusable vape. And a disposable vape is about £6.99 a unit, 2 for a tenner, something like that. Whereas actually with my reusable vape, my monthly bill is about £35. So it's actually cheaper for me to use a reusable vape than it is a disposable, but I can also get the same flavours now in a reusable vape as I could do in a disposable vape. So I'm not sure that I would agree that the correlation between removing disposable vapes and then a prevalence in children smoking would actually come out, because they could use a reusable vape nowadays and get the same flavours that are in a disposable vape.
And a reusable vape may cost as little as £10, as I understand it. So let's see what happens. But if those reusable, the government's own impact assessment at page 40 says that they are expecting that as a result of these measures, of current smokers, 20% of current smokers will revert back to smoking or alternative non-vaping products. And in terms of recent ex-smokers, 3% will revert back to smoking or alternative non-vaping products. Those two added together make to 29% of current vapers will no longer be using disposable vapes. They won't be migrating or transitioning to reusable vapes, because the figures here say that of current smokers transitioning to reusable vapes will be 24%. So slightly less than the numbers who will be reverting to smoking or alternative non-vaping products. And in terms of recent ex-smokers, it's encouraging that 7% of recent ex-smokers will be transitioning to reusable vapes, whereas only 3% will be reverting back to smoking or alternative non-vaping products. So that's significant, but I'm concerned about the 29% of current vapers who are going to be driven back into smoking. And is that a good thing for them or for public health? I don't think that it is. And the honourable gentleman has referred to his background as a smoker and now a vaper. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have to admit to never having smoked and never having vaped. So I come to this House with an enormous amount of wisdom and experience on this subject. I'm driven by the fact that both my parents, they smoked very heavily as a result of their experiences in the war, when there wasn't much else to do, when you weren't fighting the Germans other than smoking. So it was, and as a result of that, that was very bad for their health, and it was for so many people of that generation. So I don't wish to encourage people to smoke. But this regulatory impact assessment, Madam Deputy Speaker, makes no reference to the benefits that will come to the tobacco companies and to the exchequer from the increased number of people who will smoke as a direct result of the implementation of these regulations. I think that's a serious omission from all this. But can I just say that earlier on some people were saying that there's a shortage of information available on this. And I think that the debate that we're having about this, and indeed are having, will be having on the bill that's coming forward in the next fortnight, is inhibited by the extraordinary interpretation that the government puts upon the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, particularly Article 5.3 of the relevant treaty. That article seeks to ensure that interactions between the tobacco industry and policymakers are conducted transparently. We're all in favour of that. But it does not apply to interactions between the vaping industry and policymakers regarding vape regulation. I've been told, however, by some imperial brands and I think British American Tobacco and others, that they've been unable to access government ministers or government officials because ministers and officials are falsely interpreting that framework convention as prohibiting such engagement. It specifically doesn't inhibit or prevent such engagement. And I think it is probably the fault of the government that as a consequence of that, it is not as well informed about these issues as it could and should be. Article 5.3 does not preclude policymakers, elected or unelected, from engaging with the tobacco industry or associated parties. And let's have open dialogue about this, instead of a situation where, as I understand it from talking to somebody from Imperial Brands, efforts by them to engage with government officials and government ministers are rejected on the grounds that that's inconsistent with this WA Framework Convention. It's not inconsistent with the WHO Framework Convention, and if anything else positive comes out of this debate, I hope that one thing will be that the government will rethink that total lack of engagement with the manufacturers of vaping products. We've got some really good manufacturers of vaping products who are based in this country. Why are we trying to put those people out of business and encouraging the Chinese manufacturers to run rampant in our marketplace, which they are doing with increasing effect. So my plea to the government, I hope the Minister will address this in responding to this debate. My plea to the government is to engage with the tobacco manufacturers and organisations, companies like Imperial Brands, who are interested in promoting smoking alternatives. They're interested in promoting vaping. And that's why all the projections are that the amount of vaping going on in this country is going to increase significantly. That's fine, but please can we try and ensure that we don't drive people back to smoking? That's going to be really bad for our public health. It's going to be bad for the National Health Service. And I just despair at the fact that nobody from any of the three front benches has addressed this issue of the unintended consequences on public health resulting from these regulations.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I begin by saying how much I enjoyed listening to that very interesting debate, and I pay tribute. Let me begin by first of all welcoming the honourable gentleman to his place and his new role in the Shadow DEFRA team, and send our good wishes for Poppy the dog after her close encounter with a vape of a disposable kind, and hope that this legislation avoids such encounters in the future. Can I thank the Honourable Lady for Eastleigh for her generous speech and in support of this measure. Can I also welcome my honourable friend for South Dorset to his place and say there was a chuckle of recognition that went round the chamber when we were taken on a ramble of his constituency, both through the geological and the geographical, but also the big-hearted people that come from his part of the world. It's a gorgeous part of the world, and it was my privilege to open a section of the coastal path there in a previous role, but I know that he will continue the work of Margaret Hodge in this place, in his role on the Public Accounts Committee, and I'm sure his constituents are delighted to have one of their local sons representing them, and I was really pleased to hear about his passion to bringing jobs and growth to his area. Let me begin, Madam Deputy Speaker, by addressing some of the issues raised. First of all, I do also pay tribute to the Honourable Lady for Sleaford and North Hykeham. As a paediatrician, she is uniquely placed to warn of the dangers of these products. I haven't come across a SpongeBob SquarePants vape yet, but who knows what the future holds. And I was very distressed to hear of the incident at her local school with 8 children collapsing, and I do wish those young people and their families well, but it's a striking reminder of the dangers that particularly illegal products, as mentioned by the Honourable Member for Christchurch, that these illegal products pose. Let me talk a little bit about the recycling and producer responsibility, about who should pay the costs, because what we do know is that there is no such place as away. There is no away. You cannot put it into her local river. It will always turn up. It will always bleed into the environment. And everything that we do to the environment, we eventually do to ourselves. So I think it's important that those responsible for putting vapes on the market are accountable for their disposal. A consultation on reforming the producer responsibility system for waste electricals was held under the previous government at the end of 2023. We're considering the responses, but we did note near unanimous support for the proposal to create a new category of electrical equipment specifically for vapes in the waste electrical and electronic equipment regulations. This would ensure that producers of vapes are properly funding the collection and treatment of those products when they reach the end of their life. We recognise the importance of taking action to ensure the costs of recycling these products are being borne by those who make them, and we will outline our next steps on this in due course. To answer the question raised by the honourable gentleman for Epping, monitoring of the ban and its impacts, including in devolved governments, we will monitor the impacts of the ban. We will share data and intelligence from Border Force and from trading standards and from all 4 nations to ensure effective implementation and to make sure that these regulations come in at the same time so we don't create an unfortunate internal market. Disposal of existing stock, the 6-month period is essentially to enable responsible and reputable businesses. We expect businesses to obey the law of the land so that when we regulate, we are right to assume most people will obey the law. So this is to help ensure businesses do not have masses of stock to dispose of, but unsold stock becomes waste electronics and should be disposed of via those routes. So again, avoiding the black bin. We know that vapes present challenges to recycle, but we need to stem the flow and target those that are designed to be used only a small number of times. So reusable vapes are part of a wider shift to the circular economy. And I do have some sympathy with the honourable gentleman for Christchurch, because understanding it's reusable, refillable and refillable, we're trying our best not to create loopholes for creative businesses to get around. We have seen more reusable products coming onto the market in anticipation of this ban, and we will promote the ban to improve awareness both for the public and retailers, so we encourage shops to stop purchasing single-use vapes and to run down their current stocks. We are seeing more vape bins in supermarkets, high street retailers and garages, following changes to take-back requirements that were brought in earlier this year. So that will support people to dispose of vaping products responsibly, keeping them off the streets and out of the bins. The regulations will be subject to regular review. They're set out in legislation, so we will have a review of enforcement and civil sanctions within 3 years and a post-implementation review at least every 5 years. We are currently collecting baseline data on the wholesalers and retailers of single-use vapes in England to support future assessments. The Department of Health and Social Care monitors current rates of smoking and vaping through various surveys, including the periodic smoking, drinking and drug use among young people survey and the Action on Smoking and Health annual surveys. So we will use both of those to monitor the impacts on people. Just to go to the import piece, if vapes are discovered at ports, then Border Force can retain the products and alert the local authority trading standards officers. And if there is evidence that greater intervention is needed at the borders, then we will not hesitate to act. Single-use vapes, sure.
Does she not share my concern that I understand that only 1 in 3,000 containers coming into a port like Southampton is actually inspected, and it only needs 1 container to get through? It might have tens of millions of pounds worth of vapes in 1 container.
Well, I thank him for that intervention. I think a lot of public services have been run down under the last 14 years, and what we have seen in the budget was a £75 million investment in Border Security Command to crack down on organised crime, and often gangs are operating in multiple sectors of the economy. So I think we need time for this new approach to intelligence gathering and sharing to bed in. Single-use vape, can I make some progress, because I'm just conscious of time, and then I'm very happy towards the end to take some interventions because I might answer the questions in advance. Single-use vapes are one form of illicit vapes. The government is planning to introduce other pieces of vape legislation under the Tobacco and Vapes Bill, as well as the vaping product duty, as part of a cross-government approach. So we will be looking at these things in future and focus on intelligence sharing between Border Force, HMRC and trading standards. Enforcement is critical to the effectiveness, and we will work closely with Department for Health and Social Care and the relevant enforcement bodies. But I do take on board what the gentleman for Christchurch said about size and number of vapes, because I actually picked up an illegal vape on the street outside my home, and it was rechargeable but not refillable, but it had too many puffs in it to actually be legal. And for those of us who aren't vapers, it's a whole world of complexity. So I'm certainly on a steep learning curve. The legislation has been drafted to address concerns manufacturers could circumvent the ban, by example, for adding a USB port to the end of a single-use device and calling it reusable. But if a manufacturer adheres to these regulations, then they will have produced a reusable vape. So they need batteries that can be recharged, the tank can be refilled or the pods replaced, and the coil, which is part of the vape that burns out with use, can be replaced. And this actually goes further than other countries, such as France and Belgium. Let me just go to the health impacts. There were some concerns raised by my honourable friend, the Honourable Lady for Newcastle East. We know that tobacco is a harmful product and is responsible for 1 in 4 of all cancer deaths, killing up to 2/3 of its long-term users. And that's why the government is creating the first smoke-free generation, so children turning 15 this year or younger can never legally be sold tobacco, whilst not stopping anyone who currently legally smokes from being able to do so. So this ban doesn't ban all vapes, just the ones that harm the environment. There will still be easy-to-use products on the market to help adults stop smoking. The Honourable Gentleman mentioned the 29% of users reverting to smoking once the ban comes in. This is incorrect to suggest that the single-use vape ban will see a surge in smoking rates. The assessment states we expect most single-use vape users to either stop smoking, switch to reusable vapes or non-vape products, nicotine replacement therapies such as nicotine patches and gum. And the Tobacco and Vapes Bill, recently introduced by government, takes strong action to strengthen enforcement on illegal vapes, including new fixed penalty notices, new licensing and registration powers, which will act as a deterrent, and empower trading standards to act more quickly against illegitimate producers and retailers. In the first instance, a £200 fixed penalty notice will be issued, and alongside this, a stop notice may be issued ordering the business or individual to cease the illegal activity. If it is not complied with, an individual will be guilty of an offence and liable for an unlimited fine or imprisonment of up to 6 months. So I do hope there that we have also seen the government this budget investing £70 million in local authority-led stop smoking services. So I do hope that the Swap to Stop scheme will also continue to help adult smokers ditch their cigarettes for a free vape starter kit. So let me conclude, if the Honourable Lady wants to...
I just had one question, if the Minister could indulge me. The impact assessment that's been referred to repeatedly during the debate, as I understand it, refers to this piece of legislation only and not the wider impact of other measures that the government have proposed or have brought in that haven't gone through Parliament in completion yet. Is that correct? And as such, will an assessment of the effects not need to be one that's done in the round rather than on this specific piece of legislation, which is only part of a wider plan to tackle youth vaping?
Can I thank her for her intervention? Can I say my understanding is that the assessment is for this piece of legislation. I can see my officials nodding vigorously in the box. But if there are any further questions that she would like to follow up with me following this debate, I'd be only too happy to correspond with her in person. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope I have covered most of the comments and questions raised by colleagues in this debate. This is, we're banning a product sold almost designed as a toy at pocket money products at pocket money prices, a product designed to appeal to under 18s, and this legislation is needed to stop the continued misuse of critical resources and harm to our environment, as well as supporting the wider measures we are taking across government to tackle the increase in youth vaping. It's widely supported by the vast majority of our public and our stakeholders. I trust honourable members understand and accept the need for this instrument, and I commend these regulations to the House.
The question is, as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.